This is maybe one of the quickest recordings, but as I have been going through some experience in the past 1 or 2 days of what in the past would have been described for me, I would describe it as pain, and it still feels like pain, like internal pain, emotional pain, or I even describe it as soul pain. So I've been through this experience since yesterday on. Um, and a quick insight on this experience, how it unfolds for me. I mean, at one of the most rootest, at the root of this experience seems to be the experience of self-doubt. And it's not a self like in doubting my human self. It's like the soul, at the level of the soul doubting the right to even exist. This is quite deep. It feels quite deep. And although I think it has a flavor of still having a individual ego, right? Because only the ego can doubt its own existence. And I know it's a fabulated experience, only existing within the fabulation of the soul, but it still feels damn real. So I felt to go a bit in it, because I know how real this can feel, and I know how in many cases, in many people, this same type of experience takes place, and how unconscious it is. Like, this experience takes place in many people, in many forms. I would even say that in many people that consider themselves spiritually awakened, still this experience takes place, but it's not seen, it's unconscious still. So it's like this experience seems like it has degrees. It works on a spectrum in which it still exists. This ego, I personally think that it's impossible to be ego free completely and still being in this experience where you perceive things and you have like this notion that there is a wall in front of my face and I have a hand, and if you perceive things then you have an ego. Like, you can't perceive anything if you don't have an ego. The ego is like the priest that takes the light of your being and splits it like this in many facets that become perceivable. So if there is anything that can be perceivable and distinguishable, then there is still an ego. There is the prism there. So anyway, the idea is that the ego comes with apparent, constant, unending self-doubt. There is a self-doubt which almost seems like innate or inbuilt into the structure of the ego itself. So from time to time, this this self-doubt that the ego carries deep within itself tends to surface and become seen and become conscious in through different ways. It might be triggered by a certain event, it might be triggered by a certain word a certain person has said, it might be triggered by a certain memory or certain smell. Basically, all these triggers only trigger a certain thought in the head, that thought is connected with a certain pain or fear that the soul is holding. And then when that fear is triggered, then it becomes like this sore spot on the body, which if you touch it, it becomes this enormous activation of that pain. And then that pain starts to create more and more thoughts running in the head and becomes like this feedback loop between the pain in the soul and the painful or suffering thoughts in the mind. And yeah, but I wanted to say that at the core of it, it seems like it has this level of doubt. Like doubt seems like the substance from which the pain itself stems. It's I personally have a vision about it. I think that the ego is like a crystal that goes through some stages of its development. I don't think we came here on earth to just drop our ego, to just discard ourselves of our ego. I think the ego had a role at the beginning of itself, and I feel that the ego might have a more majestic role than we can possibly imagine if we learn to work with the ego. But the ego, see, it seems like this, it's like, it's not the easiest substance to work with. You can easily cut yourself. It's like this brilliant knife or something that you can easily cut yourself in. So I understand why it's more easy to just drop the ego, than to continue working with it after you see your hands, after eons of time, still being cut all over. And I can totally get that. So, well, how I see the ego is like, at first, there is this journey that the ego seems to be on, a journey that takes it from a stone to a crystal. So at first, the ego seems like this stone, like this wild, raw, chaotic, animalistic material, which is really chaos in a form, a material form. This is the ego. The ego is like pure chaos in a way, very animalistic, very individually driven, very chaotic in its expressions, only creating chaos and disorder and noise, and it's really a tough substance to work with. It's like a stone which has a lot of density and toughness to it. And it's not easy to work with it. And it's easy to try to work with it and to be bruised over and over again because it's like a very dense stone. I don't know which is the densest stone here in reality, but like a granite or something like that. Granite or something like that. So through the development of the ego, through our life experience with it, we, the beings, the spirit, takes this ego, and through the life experience, it carries this ego through different experiences that help shape this ego, and finally, through experience, this ego is shaped from a stone into a diamond. So experience is what shapes the ego from a stone into a diamond. And if you manage to stay with this process enough and to trust it, you might get to that level where you get the diamond and you get the prize, the so-called prize. If this would be a game, I mean, I'm just referring to it in terms of this whole experience being a sort of development, like a sort of game or something that you came up for, and this is the goal of the game or something like that, to create this diamond. But the one property the ego seems to have is that it denies or fights or rejects being sculpted. So as much as this stone is dense, it will fight with the hand of the sculptor, it would have to have resistance, it will resist being sculpted. That's it. So as much as you have a powerful ego, this ego will resist being sculpted by the spirit, by the experiences. And the thing is that on one hand, it can be considered a negative thing, because as much as the ego will resist being sculpted, this is how much the spirit needs to work with the ego to sculpt it, and this is how much work, involvement, energy, effort, translated as pain, because any effort requires a sort of energy consumption which can be felt like a draining, like a pain, to work with that and to drain yourself that much to sculpt something like a for example, like a very dense stone. It requires a lot of physical effort to sculpt a very dense stone. But if you have a really mildly dense stone, then you go sculpt it and it's easy to sculpt it. But the idea is that a mild dense stone will not produce a diamond. So you need to have a very dense stone which annoys you because it's a lot of pain to work with it. But at the end, if you work with it enough, you can get the diamond. And the idea is that you can get as much of a brighter diamond as the stone is dense and resists being sculpted. So it's this is how I've seen this work with the ego. And at the very base core, one of the functions that for our minds, how it works in our own minds, how this principle can be practically observed in our own lives, is that at the very base core, one of the functions or one of the formulas of how the ego works is that it denies self-love. The ego denies to feel the love of spirit. It tries to deny it. And as much as the ego manages to resist being loved, resist being touched by the light of spirit, this is how much spirit needs to work to penetrate the ego and to make the ego feel love. But the ego then resists it. And as much as the ego resists it, in the end, you'll have this powerful diamond. You'll have the capacity to create this bright diamond at the end of the process. So the ego is resisting to be loved. It's trying to resist being shaped by love itself, which is spirit. And one way in which the ego creates this resistance is by convincing itself it itself is unworthy of love. I think we are approaching a terrain that we start to get familiar with right now. Like many of us have realized, I think, that deep within our own psyche, deep within our own being, there is this program, this software, this script that makes us hate ourselves. That makes us feel unworthy, but that makes us feel like we want to die, like we want to extinguish ourselves, like we don't deserve to exist. And these feelings and these scripts, these programs can be really quite deep buried in the subconscious mind, in the subconscious, like in the soul. They might not even come as true manifestations of consciousness. There might not even be awareness and consciousness over these processes in many beings. But for the beings that are having an usual practice of self-awareness of any kind, it's usual that they would get to become consciously aware of these programs that run within them. So I've encountered, once again since yesterday, this pain of the ego got activated, and I've managed to sit with it once again and experience this once again, the same pain, the same desire, the same conviction. It's a belief, it's a deep conviction that I don't deserve to exist. That's basically it. So it's the conviction, it's not mental, it's far from being mental. It's a deep rooted conviction in the soul, which comes with energy. So I wanted to portray it, that there is this powerful energy of self-doubt, which kind of comes and it feels like it kind of starts to take over the energetic body of the being. And then if one doesn't have this usual practice of self-awareness, or for example, the practice of resting as pure awareness, just that nothing, is easy for one to start identifying with that energy. to start being sucked in inside that energy of self-doubt, and to actually believe that that energy is true, and to be to become so sucked in into that energy of self-doubt, of self-unworthiness, of self-hate, of all of this, that one almost becomes one-on-one identified, the awareness becomes one-on-one identified with these beliefs, and there can be spiraling in this energy for a long period of time. But if one has this practice of self-awareness, which it does it, then it can easily see that, oh, okay, so this is just a program that is running in the foreground of the energetic body, and I just need to be with it, for some time now. Like, that's the precious thing that I've learned after all these years, is that when these energies come, it's like I've went through so many phases with it. Like, I've went through the phase of trying to get rid of them. I went through the phase of being scared of them. I went through the phase of trying to trick them in a way to maybe trick them with some tools to go away. And of course, I got to the phase eventually where I just realized the truth is that they are there, these states, these energies are here as teachers. And if I come in that space with them as an equal to them, and open and willing to be naked in front of them, to be there with my being, my pure being, my openness, my emptiness. I bring them there in that space with them. And I show myself as that nothing, as that emptiness, and I allow them to work and do whatever they want with me, quote unquote. Then I bring them and I tell them, like, okay, I'm here for you. Like, I'm listening. Go ahead. And I'm just surrendering to them. And for some time there's nothing. Then them starting to work with me, the very feelings that if I would have rejected them, if I would have resisted to feel them, the very feelings of self-doubt, of self-hate, of self-annihilation, all these feelings that seem the most unimaginably difficult to entertain and to allow and to live, these very feelings become the teachers. And these very feelings stop feeling so awful, actually. They stop being completely seen as completely something else, downloaders of information, upgraders of my being. So if I surrender to them, there is no more pain and fear anymore, because only the pain and fear made them seem so like monsters or fearful. Only me trying to get away from them or reject them made them feel so awful. But if I approach them and if I allow them, and if I give myself to them, if I surrender and just be there with them and just listen, then all of a sudden, the pain for the first sensation is that there is no more fear, no more pain. I don't fear anything. And I mean, just in that space with that specific feeling, which becomes almost like seen like a powerful cosmic intelligence, powerful carrier of information, and it's a sort of like such a precious information that it was kept away from me. It was something of mine in a way. It was a part of me in a way that was separated from me, and now that information is being brought to my awareness once again. Something like that it feels. So I stay there with that feeling, and as I stay there, and it's nothing like nothing of me, the human me, exists anymore when I'm there with them. It's just the feeling itself, being itself, revealing and changing and talking in a way with my being and revealing things to my being. And I'm just there. And this is how, by the way, I've come to see and understand many of these things that I am currently aware of right now. Much of the information and knowledge that I've come to understand over time was through staying with these painful feelings and with pain itself. Like, if I would name, if I think that at the end of this lifetime, if I would name my teacher, I would say that pain was my teacher. And that's the most truest thing that I could say about my experience so far, is that if I'd be truly open about how everything unfolded for me until this moment, is to say that pain was my teacher. I've learned almost anything I know of myself right now through pain. Oh, as insane as that might sound, because I know it sounds insane. So I had to stay again since yesterday with this feeling of dread and annihilation, self-doubt, self-hate. This time was more coming from the perspective of self-doubt, like different levels of self-doubt about myself. Am I doing some things correctly? Am I doing some mistakes? It's like it was this self-doubt, but when self-doubt comes for me, it's not the just like a mental thing, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that or something. No, it's like a very powerful energy that is extremely powerful, condensed, and usually in the past it would have taken me weeks or months of just rendering, just feeling, or even years if I remember. Yeah, there was a period of my life, maybe 7 years, in which there was just on the background of my being, just this state of continuous dread and self-doubt and self-hate. And this, when this state comes, for me, it's what happens is that it comes with a lot of it, like it blocks my creative power, like the creative power, the heart, it blocks the heart, so I don't have energy anymore to create, and that's becomes even more painful because without the energy coming from spirit I feel alone. Then those spirals of loneliness and feeling estranged from everything, not understanding anymore the meaning of my life and why do I exist in the first place. And then all the mind starts asking all these questions. So it cuts off the energy of spirit. When these dreadful, painful feelings would arise, it would usually cut off my energetic connection, my energetic, like my creative center here, my not my creative center but my expressive center, the center from which the heart it is, which the center from which spirit flows into the world, like the energy of spirit, the energy of love, let's say, flows and touches the world. And it would usually come, these energies, and it would block this area here, and I would not be able to have access to that energy anymore. And then the mind would feel scared and alone without that energy, and the body would feel depleted and depressed and um, just, like I would wake up in the morning and I would just want to go to sleep again. I would feel, there is a word for this, lethargic, yeah, lethargy, and or stuff like this, when I would just don't feel the need or the wanting to even have the energy to lift a spoon. Sometimes I remember there were moments in which I would look at the spoon, I knew I had to wash it, but I couldn't really feel that there is no more energy left in me to do that small operation of just washing a spoon. Yeah. So the idea is that what I've learned is that um, by allowing these energies, by stopping my resistance towards these energies, so once they were here, like the energy of self-doubt or self-hate, or mostly these ones, I think. Um, when these energies were here, as I said, much time it took me just to try to fight with them, to resist them, to try to trick them, to try to hide from them. And it took years. Like it had to be maybe, if I would be truly honest, I think the first time when I felt these feelings were back in my childhood. Maybe I was 12. Some event happened, and I think since that event on, these feelings started to attach to this energetic body here, and I lived with them fairly until now, fairly until recently. But I started to consciously become aware of how to work with them since maybe, when did that happen? Um, Maybe 4 years back, something like that. When I started that life event that I described in another video, made me understand the process of feeling the feelings, and that's when I really understood how to work with these energies. But until that point, I only tried to dismiss them, hide from them, clock them in some other shape or form and send them away. Or even after I learned to work with them, still there was a lot of why do I need to do this? I don't want to work with them. Like, I just leave me alone. That I don't want to mix and stuff like this, man. Because it's not easy peasy pie here. Like working with these energies is like being eaten up by a freaking atomic bomb, decomposing all yourselves and seeing yourself really dying and multiple times, and just watching that happen and allowing it to happen and actually, yeah, being there for it to happen. So it's not easy peasy pie, but what I've come to understand is that it kind of like it kind of puts one, may helps one or assists one moving finally forward in its true path to its own evolution of self, let's say. Like, not integrating these energies is what kept the human condition stuck in the way it was for millions of years. Because it's not the energies that I feel, these energies are not specific to me. There's nothing special about me. I am only a mere receiver of them, but the same energies are coming and being and showing themselves to any human being, and I would even say to animals as well, and to nature as well, to plants as well. So it's everything in this cosmos. It's like these energies are like the thoughts or the dreams of this cosmos. And until these dreams and energies are integrated by a being, it's like we're still trapped in this cosmos here until we learn to integrate these energies here. This is how I've seen it so far. This is what I've seen and currently managed to understand so far. It's like this entire cosmos will be this dream entity that has created this wish for some dreams to be lived, for some dreams to be integrated, experienced as realities. And it has expressed the same few handful of dreams through many, many physical realities, countless iterations, creating the same, basically the same stuff, but in different outlets. The same handful of emotions were used to create, and emotions, when I say emotions, I mean energy. So this same handful of energies were used throughout millennia to create physical realities over and over again. And it's easy to notice, and I have said this before in other videos as well, that if we look back, what drove humanity 10,000 years back, what made them move, tick, it was the same energy, the same things that is driving humanity today. Even if we look in the stories of the so-called gods of Greek mythology, let's say, if we look at the story of their lives, we can see that they were nothing different than what the story of a usual John and Betty from today is, right? So they were like envious of each other, betraying one another, the gods of Greek mythology, I mean. They were hating each other, betraying, as I said, one another, wanting power, killing one another. It was the same basic forces that were drivening them, that were immortal, right? No, they weren't immortal because they could die, right? But they were powerful, right? So they were the same forces that were driven them that they are drivening the usual person of 20th century right now, right? 21st century or 20th century. I really don't. I need to admit that I don't know. I'm quite illiterate in some subjects actually. Um, or I seem to myself like that. But anyway, so yeah, it's the way I see it is that it's this cosmic entity that has emitted these energies, and until these energies are being integrated, they will continue to be here, emitted in this universe, and they will continue to create manifestations. So somehow there has to be beings that are capable of absorbing these energies within themselves, integrating them within their being, and so finally taking them out of this cosmos and thus taking them out of existence in a way. Thus, without those energies being present, this universe can finally be freed of these constant realities, the same type of realities emerging over and over again, the same type of, it was basically the same story being told over and over again through different eras, different centuries, different people, different setups. It was the same story. It was like one single story that was continuously said, told, until somebody was there to hear it. And this is what I personally feel that is the point of all of this. So there are beings here which, in my opinion, they are capable of hearing the story. They are capable of hearing the story. So hearing the story means, first of all, listening, means stopping to emit, stopping to talk, means to listen. Listen with your being, I mean. And stopping to talk means stopping to emit thoughts, stopping to believe in thoughts, stopping to emote things, stopping to emit things and just retract everything, retract your awareness here in the center and just listening. That's listening. It's when you stop to talk. That's when you listen. So by integrating these energies, by managing to integrate these energies within us, I believe that with our being, our soul mostly, kind of like graduates from this trillium. Like, okay, I kind of integrated these energies. There is nothing left for the soul here in this realm. This soul can graduate, let's say, from this entire cosmos, not only this life on earth, but this entire cosmos on this plane of existence, I mean. This is how I came to see it. There are some specific energies that need to be integrated, and then a soul is able to graduate from this realm. And in my opinion, to link it to what I said at the beginning or before in this same recording when I was talking about the stone and the crystal, to link it to this idea, in my opinion, integrating some of these energies, some of these experiences equates for shaping that stone and finishing shaping it, finish the specific shaping this cosmos has been entitled to do with that stone. It's like you as a being, you had this stone, which was yourself, which you're carving as yourself. It was your ego. It first was only like a stone, like a very dense material, right? So then what I see is that a being can take this stone and can place it. It's like alchemy, man. It's like a freaking alchemy. So you have different liquids. You can take that stone and put it a bit into a certain type of acid that chips something away from it. Then you put it in another solution that gives it a brightness. Then you put it in another thing that starts to chisel away from it, and then you put it in another thing and slowly build this diamond out of it, right? So This is how I see it. You had the ego at first. It was this creature, this chaos, this animalistic, this even before that it was like much more. It was like at the beginning of the earth where you only had those forces, like those primordial forces of magma and lava, and there was no yet animals, nothing. It was just those primordial forces creating the basically this stone, this ego. Then everything else maybe started to unfold. But yeah, so at first you only had this ego, right? You only have the stone. And then you just insert this stone of yours, this ego of yours, this self identity, into different experiences that would shape it in some different ways. And for example, let's imagine that this entire cosmos was only one of those substances, like an acid or some substance that would give it some shining or something like that. So you inserted it there, the ego, the soul. Basically, by the way, in the way I describe it, the ego is synonymous with the soul. Soul and ego are one and the same. It's the identity of the self. So you take this ego, you take the soul, you insert it in a specific experience. It learns something, but it's not learning. I see it as a shaping more. So um, you insert it in another liquid, it gives it another thing. You insert it in another thing, it gives it another, it chisels away maybe something from it. So this is how the ego is inserted, let's say, in this cosmos now. The soul is inserted in this cosmos now, which has all these dualistic experiences, extreme opposites. It's really actually like quite something, this cosmos and this universe here. It's quite something, man. It's quite a powerful thing, a powerful tool. So let's say you insert your soul here, your ego, and your ego now has, for example, to chisel itself in some way in this cosmos, right? And after it graduates, let's say, and it manages to chisel itself in that way, then it finally is taken out, like taking that stone out of that first substance, or who knows how many, what, maybe it wasn't the first substance, maybe it was a, who knows how many number. But you take that stone out of that substance, and that's it. Then this is finished, the experience in this cosmos. But until we manage to integrate the experiences that we have, our soul has came here to integrate. And I feel this is why it was said that there was these cycles of death and rebirth, death and rebirth. It was integrating the experience a certain soul has came here to integrate, basically chiseling that specific ego, that specific soul, that specific stone in a certain way through the power of this cosmos, through the power of this universe. And I personally translate this through my experience, as my experience mostly focused on working with feelings and working with energies. So this, in my experience, was translated as learning to integrate these energies, learning to work with them, letting them work with me, basically. So this is what I've learned eventually after 20 years, or even, oh no, it's 30 years if I would say it correctly. It's more than 25, 28 years. So if I think it started at the age of 12, but I think it started earlier. I think it might have started even since I was born. So this quest for why am I here, and a part of why I'm here. I felt like it was this quest to integrate these energies. So this is what I found out, that eventually I have to let myself be chiseled by this energy. I have to surrender to them. I have to listen to them. I have to give myself to them and allow them to work with me. So, yeah, I think this was the insight that I felt to record. I thought it was going to be short, appearing now. Right now, it was a bit longer, but yeah.